lovely Nantuckets. It's your bestie Summer, and fun fact, I'm actually recording this intro after I recorded the chapter. But yeah, I totally forgot to record the intro and just started going at it with the recording the reading. And so I totally finished reading. I still have to edit it, obviously, but I finished reading and everything. Not completely finished. I still have a few things I need to read, but I totally forgot to do the intro. So that's what I'm doing right now. I realized that I had to do it because I was listening to podfics because I was taking a break from editing. And so I was listening to different podfics and drawing, and then I realized oh yeah. I forgot to do that. But anyway, this is part 5, chapter 2 of Death Lingering, a Sally Face podfic written by Canis Rising and read by Summer Audio. Enjoy! The day he decided he'd finally go outside, it was late in the afternoon on a Saturday. He was looking paler than usual from the lack of proper sunlight, and he had to put another hole in his belt with his pocket knife from the weight he'd lost. It was the second one he had to put in since he bought it months ago. Even his boxers were having a hard time staying up. He went out in a long-sleeve shirt and a jacket on top, in spite of the summer sun beating down on him. The sleeves provided obvious coverage to his now bandaged arms, and the heavy weight of the jacket was like a security blanket, reminding him that his body was there, at least he forgot. His father questioned him slightly as he made his way out, but didn't push it. It was nice how, over the years, his father learned to let Sal have his privacy. For a period, because of all of the guilt and constantly choosing the bottle over his son, he became incredibly overbearing as some kind of overcompensating coping mechanism. It was likely the biggest source of his frustration with people treating him the way they did when they were worried about him, because he liked to disallow Sal from shutting or locking his bedroom door. He's better now than he was then, and Sal was grateful for that. But Sal had a habit of holding on to the past a little too hard at times, and he remained ready to snap at his father. He tried to avoid as many people as possible as he made his way outside, which was easy because there didn't seem to be anyone in the halls, not even Chug. Everyone was either out or in, no in between today. Thank fuck. He made his way out of the apartment complex and down the street. He didn't have a plan for where he was going. He just stepped out the main door to the apartment and began walking. Because of his clothes and his mask, the sun didn't touch very much of his bare skin, but feeling its warmth through his clothes provided a sense of relief that the heater in his apartment couldn't give. The air outside was fresh and clear, not bogged down by the damp wood, musty ventilation, and mold that's likely in the apartments. It was nice, but he wished it made him feel something. He hopes it eventually will, but that feeling begins to fade the longer his walk gets. Being inside for this long has distorted him again. After years of exploration, he knew this town like the back of his hand, but that didn't change the fact that every corner he turned felt like a place he'd never been before. He felt alien to every person he passed, as if he were just a passive observer of the world and not a part of it. He touched the brick wall of the diner that he frequented with his friends, and the sensation was so dull he felt like he could push his hand through the brick if he really wanted to. Like his body wasn't even corporeal. His head was empty as he floated through the town, walking without purpose or direction. The sky was gray, and the experience was so dull that the people walking past him on the sidewalk practically phased through him. It was like they didn't notice him either. He drifted through the town until he ended up at the park, unable to remember how he got there. Not at the playground, but the big, grassy area with space for people to walk or run. trees to sit under, pathways to walk around. It wasn't as well kept as it could have been, evidenced by the old fountain in the middle having largely been non-functional for probably about a decade now, covered in dead vines snaking their way through the cracked concrete, or the way the stone benches on the perimeter were wobbly and falling over. It wasn't pretty, but it was a nice place to people watch when it was full. Right now, though, it was mostly empty, with only 2 other people in the area, likely due to the gray skies warning of eventual rain. Sal claimed a tree and sat underneath it, sweating underneath his heavy jacket in the humid summer air, but he still didn't want to take it off. He felt like the weight of his jacket was the only thing keeping him attached to the ground. He was afraid if he took it off, he might float away into nothing. From his pocket, he pulled out a lighter and a pack of cigarettes. The only vice he had and his father didn't know about yet. The old man would probably have a heart attack if he did. Smoking from underneath his mask was a bit awkward, with the bottom buckles off and the mask lifted so that he couldn't see very well. But Larry always thought it looked cool when he blew the smoke out of his mask and it came out the holes for his eyes, nose, and little slits for the mouth. He did that just for Larry, and was surprised at the small sense of joy that he got from it. That, or it was the nicotine. Nicotine had such an irritatingly diminishing effect, and he knew that calmness that he got was really just the absence of the jitters of nicotine withdrawal, but that didn't change the rush of relief he got from the first drag. He leaned his head against the trunk of the tree and tried to enjoy a nice day for the first time in a few weeks. He let the smoke burn his throat and stain his lungs, feeling the tension in his body wash away just a little bit. "I didn't know you smoked." A familiar voice came from next to him. Sal jolted at the sound, tension instantly returning as he quickly buckled his prosthetic back up as fast as he could. He desperately wanted to avoid anyone seeing what was underneath it. He couldn't handle that right now. He looked around frantically for who might have said that, his mind so untethered that he couldn't immediately place who it was. Suddenly, a large amount of leaves pulled from one of the trees had been dropped on his head, startling him even further. He jumped up, looking into the branches to see who it was that was fucking with him. Inside the thick of the tree branches sat Travis, looking performatively nonchalant in what seemed like the perfect spot to be sitting in, as the branches he sat on were kind of shaped like a chair. He had with him a book, but Sal couldn't tell what it was. Knowing what kind of stick was up Travis's ass all the time, it was probably a Bible or something stupid like that. Sal was trying to think of the kindest way he could tell Travis to please fuck off. He's really not in the fucking mood right now. And he's especially not in the mood to deal with Travis, of all people, poking and prodding at him until he broke even further. But before he knows it, Travis is climbing down from the tree and preparing to do something. "Wow, you kind of look like shit," Travis said after getting down and getting a good look at Sal. "Nice to see you too, Travis," Sal said. He had a hard time believing that Travis could tell how bad he looked without his mask on, but considering the unwashed hair and dirty clothes, plus the odd jacket, he realized that maybe you don't need to see someone's face to know that. Travis gave a long pause, like he was mulling something over in his head. "I'll leave you alone," Travis said suddenly, before he turned on his heel and prepared to hightail it out of there. Sal pushed his back against the trunk of the tree and slid back down to the ground. From what Sal knew about the 4th of July incident, both from his hazy memories and conversation with Larry, Travis had something to do with his episode. He was there, and he saw it. From what Larry said, Travis was comforting him through a lot of it, which was pretty unusual considering the fact that Travis seemed to have a pretty strong distaste for Sal and his friends. What with all of the slur hurling and face punching and all of that. That was incredibly off to Sal, and for the first time that day, for the first time in weeks, he was overwhelmed with feelings of curiosity and confusion. He had to know. Sal called out to Travis's shrinking figure in the distance. That figure then slowed down and stopped, turned around, gave him an incredulous look, and walked back over. "What do you want, Sally Face?" Travis asked, but all that nickname did was jog some kind of memory. He was delirious from panic, tears running down his face so hard for so long that the skin of his cheeks felt raw. Loud bangs from the sky kept pulling him back into his nightmares, endless flashes that consumed him whole. Blood on his face, his hands, in his mouth. He swallowed. From the hell inside his head, there came an unexpected light. Clarity. Something to grab hold of. Something to remind him of where he was. Who he was. "Sally Face?" Travis had asked again, arms now crossed with a small book in his hand. Sal blinked as the memory came back to him, before he looked up to Travis. Based on his body language, he was irritated, as usual, but that was all he could make out from the blur that his shape had become as he walked away. He really needed to get contact lenses or something. Sal sighed and moved over underneath the tree trunk, making room for Travis, who just gave him another incredulous look. But Sal just patted the ground next to him, quietly asking him to sit down. Sal didn't know why he obliged. Travis didn't seem to know either. But they sat on the ground, watching wind blow through the mostly empty park. It was quiet for a long time before either of them spoke. "Haven't seen you in a while," Travis said. "Not since, the first couple of days of school." "Yeah," Sal replied. "Kinda thought you killed yourself or something." Travis was talking like he wanted to scare Sal off, but the bluntness he spoke with put Sal at ease. He knew that Travis wouldn't sugarcoat anything or pity him. Probably didn't even worry about him, but if he did, it wasn't like the way other people seemed to. "Can't get rid of my ugly mug that easily," Sal replied, a twinge of a smile at the corner of his mouth that could still do that, though Travis couldn't see it. Travis gave a short, curt laugh. "Don't I know it? You're like a little roach. You just keep coming back." There was another long silence. Sal held on to that sentence during the silence, like it was something else that would stop him from floating away. "Why do you want me to sit with you?" Travis asked. Sal pondered over how to best answer that question, but really he couldn't find a way to ease Travis into a conversation about what happened on the 4th. He decided the best option was to just ask him outright. "You were with me on the 4th?" Sal said. He stared straight ahead, not looking at Travis's face. He was sure he could imagine what it looked like, and it wasn't something he needed to see right now. Travis took a while to respond. "Yeah," he said simply. "Yeah, I was." Travis didn't seem to be looking at him either. A lot of the bite that was in his voice previously had suddenly disappeared. "What happened?" Sal asked. Travis thought about how to respond for a long time, longer than Sal would have expected. He wondered what Travis might be hiding, or maybe sugarcoating. "Well, you cried all over me, got blood all over my hand, and Larry had to see me being nice to you, so overall it was pretty shit." Travis sneered at nothing before his distasteful expression disappeared and was replaced with something more somber. "And," he started, but he paused. He picked at his cuticles, worried the edge of his sweaters away even further. He didn't know how to say the next part. "And what?" Sal asked. He didn't entirely remember the events, but he was fairly sure he knew what it was. He remembered taking off his prosthetic before he bolted from Larry. He didn't remember putting it back on. Wasn't difficult to put two and two together, but he hoped against the odds that it wasn't true anyway. His stomach burned inside him. "I saw your face," Travis said simply. He wasn't sure if having confirmation that this happened was supposed to make him feel better or worse, but his brain decided he should feel both things at once. He wished he could scalp himself with his pocket knife right now, but he also wished he could cry on Travis's shoulder again. Unfortunately, neither of these things were ideal right now, so instead, he white-knuckled his lighter and continuously flicked it on and off, trying to ward off the nervous energy of it all. Yeah, Travis responded to Sal's quiet panic. Sal really didn't want to cry in front of Travis again, especially not in public. He had to say something to keep the conversation going. Huh. He gave a short, curt laugh. I'm the undefeated champion of Knockfell's ugliest cross-dresser competition. Think I'd make it to state championships? His voice wavered a bit too much. It might have been better had he not said anything at all. Travis scoffed. Considering the kind of freaks you hang around, I'm surprised you don't get more compliments, he said, crossing his arms. The cover of his book now faced Sal, and he peered down to see what Travis had been reading. It was a copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray. He didn't say anything, and quietly filed that information away in his brain for later. You're being sarcastic? Sal said quietly, glancing back up towards Travis. No, I'm serious, he replied sternly. You hang around the kinds of people who'd think you look wicked, like in a good way. I'm surprised they're not making you feel like a model or something. Sal didn't really know how to respond to that. He just looked at Travis with this strange, blank look as he processed the words coming out of his mouth. Not that he could look at Travis any other way with his prosthetic on, but underneath it, he was making the exact same expression. Sal tried to speak, but he didn't really have anything to say. Anything he tried just trailed off into nothing. Whatever Travis was doing, it certainly shocked him out of his nerves. Frankly, I thought you'd look worse under there. I don't even see why you need the prosthetic. Having a hole in your cheek and missing your nose doesn't look that bad. He crossed his arms and continued looking straight ahead. Makes no difference to me what you look like. You're a freak either way. That was all such a strange thing to say to someone who had a hole in their cheek all the way to their teeth, and the entirety of the cartilage of their nose completely torn off, plus a glass eye, partial denture implants, and any hopes of ever being legally allowed to drive completely removed from the table at 17 years old. That's not counting all of the scars on his face, in uncanny tones of fleshy purple and pink, with veins visible underneath the thinned-out skin. The surface of his jawline was completely changed into something textured and unnatural from the missing chunks of flesh. At least he only had to shave off half his face in the morning. Because of his extra face hole, he hated eating in front of other people, not just because that meant he had to take off the prosthetic, but because it's all too often that slightly masticated food would just fall out of the hole in his mouth and onto the table. Or worse, it'd sit there, half in, half out, and he sometimes wouldn't even notice for entirely too long. Over the years, he's gotten pretty good at managing to keep the food inside his mouth, but sometimes he still slips up. He'd long since lost any hope of finding a girl, or a guy, who would put up to his appearance, especially after that one time in gym when his prosthetic slipped off in front of a cute girl he barely knew, and she screamed in shock and terror. You're a freak either way. The words ran through his mind, clear as a bell, but the message struggled to compute. Not because of his face, not because of his mother's murder. It was something innate, probably hereditary, but he supposed that he might have been taught somehow. Nevertheless, it was only natural for him to disregard what other people were doing simply because he wanted to, which often made him a weirdo in the eyes of other kids. Even before his mother was murdered, he was always a creep that the other kids struggled with. He was bouncy and fidgety, disruptive in class, and kids poked fun at his cleft lip. He liked to read books about medieval torture methods and could name too many of the bones in the human body for his father's comfort from a young age. He was wearing dresses since he pulled the fairy princess outfit down from the shelf at the Halloween store when he was 5. He was called an F-slur and a D-slur by the same groups of people because nobody knew what he was any more than he did. He was the last to be picked at gym and the first to throw up running the mile, and was probably the only kid in New Jersey history who never learned to ride a bicycle because he was too scared. And the hole in your cheek? Are you kidding me? That's like super metal or whatever you freaks call it. You look just like all the monsters from those horror movies you guys watch. Isn't that supposed to be cool or something? Why are you looking at me like that? Travis sneered at Sal. Sal blinked a few times and turned away. Sorry, he said. Sorry. I don't know. You just said a lot of things. A look of realization crossed Travis's face. He almost looked guilty. Sorry, Travis said. I know I should be nicer to you than that. You've been a lot nicer to me than I deserve. Travis looked straight forward into an empty park again, pulling his knees to his chest. No, Sal said. I'm not upset. I don't know. Nobody's said anything quite like that to me before. Travis turned to look at him. What, insulted you? I didn't feel like that was an insult. Sal looked back, and Travis was the first to blink. You just said my friends think I look cool. They've never really said it. They don't really talk about my face very much, but I think you might be right. Sal pulled his knees to his chest, mirroring Travis. I called you freaks, Travis said quietly. I mean, it's true, Sal admitted. But you used to call us F-slurs and flamers, so I think you might have grown a bit from then. There was a hint of this pride in Sal's voice that made Travis recoil. I'm about to go back to calling you an F-slur. He sneered and looked away, but there was something so oddly comfortable about the conversation in Sal's mind. Well, it's not like it would be untrue, Sal said, and Travis could hear the smirk in his voice and put on this mildly distasteful expression. There was this unspoken acknowledgement between Travis and Sal that happened a long time ago, when they had that conversation in the bathroom. Sal had asked if his father was pushing these ideas onto him, but really, there was no point in asking that. Everyone knew what a zealot Pastor Phelps was. What Sal was really saying when he was asking that, when he told Travis that he didn't have to listen to his father, was, I know you're an F-slur too. Travis never said it out loud, but Sal kept hoping that if he did it around him enough, that one day he might. I wanted to talk to you when I saw you because you were the one person I could trust. Sal changed the subject before Travis could say anything else. What in the hell are you talking about, Sallyface? Travis whipped his head around to look at Sal quizzically. What you just called me. Calling me Sallyface, calling me a freak, an F-slur. Sal leaned his head against the trunk of the tree. You're the only one who doesn't act like all of my bones are gonna break if you don't wear the kid gloves. Travis looked at Sal with an unreadable expression. It didn't seem like he knew what to say at that, as if he didn't even consider Sal was going through something like that. Knowing the way Travis talked about Sal and his friend group, he probably didn't. He probably thought that aside from all of the trauma, his life with his friends was all cupcakes and dandelions. It's fine. Most people did. Travis wasn't talking, so Sal continued. You called me that when I was in the thick of it. Sally face, and it helped, mostly. He fidgeted with his fingers. I think it's because people only started calling me that after the incident. It reminded me of where I was. Most people I know wouldn't think to call me that in the middle of an episode, because at this point it's a joke more than anything else. But you did. Travis was quiet, as he thought. He really only called Sal that because he felt weird calling him by his first name, especially when trying to be nice to the guy. They weren't friends. They didn't even really know each other outside of the bickering they did in the school halls. The only name Travis felt entitled to call him was that pejorative nickname. He never thought about it much, the way the other people treated Sal. To Travis, it seemed like nothing stuck to him, no matter what. He was confident in himself. He had friends. He was thoughtful and optimistic about life in spite of what he'd gone through. But maybe that wasn't true. Travis could see the way the other people treated Sal on a daily basis. He wasn't stupid. He recognized the pious commiseration that every regular person, aside from his friends, gave people like Sal. When people realized that they couldn't beat him into the circle of normalcy, they decided it was because he was too stupid to know what he was doing, and so they watched him from inside their glass cage and pitied him. They engorged themselves in their sorrowful gossip about how sad it was that they had everything they thought he should want, when he just didn't care. It was easy to get into the habit of thinking that things just didn't affect him. He seemed to take everything he was given with all the apparent ambivalence his prosthetic provided, coupled with the generally hopeful attitude he brought with him everywhere. Jealousy festered inside of Travis when he could let the pity bounce off him so easily, that he could take all of this from everyone around him and just disregard it. Hatred and platitudes alike rolled off of him like water off of a duck. Travis couldn't do that so easily. The people's pity stuck to him like beggar's lice, and boy, was he covered in it. He was the son of an aggressive zealot pastor that had strong beliefs in corporal punishment for both your kids and your wives. It remained largely unspoken due to how influential his father was throughout the community, but everyone knew. He could tell by the way they looked at him and his mother, back before she ran off. It was so performative. All they did was stand around, caring just enough to feel sorry for him and his mother, but not enough to do anything about it. His father was viewed as a pillar of the community, but he was still just one man. He could be driven out of town, he could be killed, just like anybody else. But they didn't. They would rather stand around with their thumbs up their asses, watching the production of the most entertaining gossip in Knockfell. Not a single one of them would care to give him a bed if he needed it. He knew from experience. Maybe Sal understood a lot more of this than he'd realized. "I get it," Travis said, his voice melancholic and somber. He didn't look at Sal, just kept staring straight ahead into the broken old fountain in the middle of the park, his chin resting on his knees. He didn't elaborate. He felt like his thoughtful silence was enough. "I don't think you're that ugly," Travis said, after yet another period of quiet between the two of them. It was what he was saying earlier, this time without the veil of insults to pat his ego. "I've seen worse. Mrs. Packerton looked pretty bad." Mrs. Packerton looked worse. Sal had to hold his tongue. He couldn't get into the bologna situation with the one person who loved bologna day the most out of everyone in the entire school. He might honestly kill himself. Sal tried to just take the comment for what it was. It was something nice, something he'd never heard anyone else say before. He and his friends enjoyed leaning into the label of ugly in a sense of odd reclamation. But there was something unique in being told that he wasn't, especially when it was coming from Travis. This is weird, but the hole in the cheek thing, Travis didn't look at him as he tried to come up with a way to compliment Sal in a way that didn't bruise his pride, but Sal beat him to it. Wicked, like in a good way. Travis punched his shoulder gently. Shut up. Sal was glad his first interaction with humanity this week was Travis. If it were anyone else, anyone that cared about him, anyone that wanted to give him those pity eyes or to worry about him so much that they couldn't leave him alone, Sal might have taken his other eye out safely and humanely, with great care and little emotion. But Travis didn't care about that. Frankly, Sal didn't know what Travis cared about. All he knew was that Travis was the first person to make him smile in a couple of weeks. And that was the only thing that really mattered right now. Some parts of it were awkward and stilted, but somehow Sal found Travis's blunt and assertive nature oddly relaxing to his nerves. And Travis found Sal's easygoing attitude rather welcoming to an asshole like him. Despite the typical summer heat, they didn't realize how close they'd gotten to each other, their legs touching, feeling the almost irritating warmth of the other. It was almost like they lived in a world where being friends made sense. Christian closet case and ugly metalhead, causing trouble everywhere. It was strange to Sal how easily they managed to get along when nobody else was around. And Sal's hand brushed closely against Travis's. As he realized how close they were, he found he didn't care to move. It was the first physical contact he had in a while that wasn't from his own father. And if they hadn't just sat down and started being next to each other's faces just a bit ago, Sal probably would have been borderline cuddling him the same way he does with Larry. It was the way Travis gave him this strangely calm expression, the way he bumped and brushed against Sal so easily. Something told Sal he didn't care to move either. It was peaceful. Travis only moved when he checked the time on his watch and realized how late it was. Shit, I need to get home. I have homework to fail, and my dad probably noticed I'm not home by now, he said, suddenly feeling awkward. Sal checked his own watch. It was about 5:30, but it felt later due to the overcast sky. I should probably get going too, Sal said, and they both stood up, dusting the leaves and the dirt off of their clothes quietly. One thing, before you go. Sal broke the silence for a final goodbye. Travis turned back to him right before Sal hugged him as tight as he could for just a couple of seconds. Long enough for Travis to freeze and drop his book on the ground just before abruptly letting go and whipping himself around, all before Travis could get the chance to respond. Bye, Travis. Thanks for the talk. He waved over his shoulder as he made his way back to the apartment, this time walking instead of floating. Travis watched Sal walk away, letting the lingering sensation of that hug from the other boy feed that sick yearning in his chest again and again and again. He watched, frozen, until Sal turned a corner and finally disappeared. He slowly moved to pick his book up off of the ground, realizing that was probably the first time someone had hugged him in a couple of years. Being a prolifically unlikable asshole does that to you. As he stared at the white cover of his book, he wondered what could have made Sal want to do something like that. He learned a lot of things about Sal today, but that didn't make him much less of an enigma to Travis. Watching Sal slowly walk home, he realized that it didn't matter anyway. There was no point in wondering why freaks like Sal did anything. Freaks did things just because they could, and Sal was nothing if not a freak. Sal opened the door to the apartment, welcomed by the smell of his father making something that wasn't microwaved, which was always welcomed. "You were out for a while," he said, stirring what looked like it could have been an instant mashed potatoes. "Yeah, I was just catching up with a friend." Sal took off his jacket and threw it over the recliner in the living room. "Oh, that's good. I'm glad you're feeling better." The worry in his father's eyes melted into something warm, something he could walk into. "Me too." He smiled underneath his prosthetic. "What are you making?" Sal pulled out a chair at the table, wiping dust and old crumbs off of it and onto the floor. "Oh, just some lemon pepper chicken breast and some mashed potatoes. Nothing fancy." Henry leaned over the stove to check on said chicken breast. Sal took a healthy whiff of the cooking. His sense of smell wasn't very strong anymore, but he could smell it because he was close to the source. "Well, it smells good enough for me." Sal began to take off his prosthetic. "It better. I slaved over a hot stove for a total of maybe 20 whole minutes so far." His father bragged sarcastically. He finished stirring the mashed potatoes and seemed satisfied with their consistency, so he began to plate the food, 1 chicken breast and a scoop of mashed potatoes for each of them. Maybe it wouldn't have killed them to add a vegetable to that, but they didn't have any. The old twigs of rosemary that Henry threw on top just to make it look pretty would have to suffice. They talk about their days, and while Sal doesn't feel like divulging much about his conversation with Travis, he does take the time to appreciate how much his father has changed for him. He'll probably never fully give up drinking, but Sal has made his peace with that as long as he's not the way he was when he was 12, which he hasn't been for a long time now. He used to never cook. Sal used to have to do that for the both of them, and he was often bad at it. But now, he does it a couple times a week. He used to never be there for him during the really bad nightmares or the flashbacks or the breakdowns. But now, he's there to bring Sal to bed when he crashes after an episode. He used to never apologize for anything, but now he's not afraid to look Sal in the one eye he has left and say he's sorry. Things could have been bad between them. They could have been really bad. So bad Sal could have never forgiven him for a long time. Sal was really worried that this would be his future, losing his mother abruptly and his father slowly in the fallout. But it didn't. He got better. He put in the work and came out the other side. Well, it's not quite what it used to be. Sal has had to confront the fact that it never will be. That time is long past them. But now, the little life they've made for themselves together was all Sal could have ever wanted out of this. After dinner, they did the dishes together. Sal washed and Henry dried, together working a calm and tender rhythm as they continued chatting idly about plans for the up-and-coming week, of which Sal did not have very many, considering he was just beginning to come out of his spiral, and that probably wasn't going to change anytime soon. His father, on the other hand, had been invited to dinner with Lisa and some of her other friends. Being rather introverted and socially strange, this was big for Henry, and he was going to spend the rest of the next week mentally preparing for that Thursday if it killed him. How exactly he would do that, he wasn't sure yet, but he'd figure it out. When they were finished, Sal dried his hands off and pulled his father close. "Thank you," he said, arms wrapped around his father, unable to reach completely around his figure, ever widening in his middle age, while Sal just never seemed to get any bigger. For the dinner? Of course, Sally." His father hugged him back. "For everything," Sal said quietly. Henry paused before he seemed to realize what Sal was thanking him for. "I couldn't have done it without you, kiddo." "Is it okay if I invite Larry over?" Sal pulled away from the hug and began to put his prosthetic back on. "Oh, so that's what this is about." Henry crossed his arms and cocked his hip out, trying to get a rise out of his son. "Oh, shut up. It is not." Sal punched him in the arm. "Dramatic old man." Henry laughed and messed up Sal's hair. "Yeah, go ahead. Just don't get too loud. This isn't the basement, you know." He wasn't about to deny Sal's first request to have a friend over in weeks. He just really hoped they would make good on their promise to stay quiet this time. The two boys had a habit of causing Henry to acquire a plethora of noise complaints when they hung out in 402 over the years. These thin walls couldn't hide anything, and only the college kids got any leeway to be loud for some reason. Sal beamed underneath his mask. Thanks. Sal rushed to his room, digging out his walkie and fully extending the large antenna, hoping the batteries didn't run out just yet. He was finally feeling the desire to speak to someone close to him, someone worried about him, without wanting to curl up and die inside, and he was going to take every advantage of that. He mentally prepared himself for Larry's overly protective antics and reminded himself that out of all of his friends, Larry was the one who was most likely to fuck off if Sal could just throw a pair and tell him to. Larry? Sal said into the walkie. He was laying on his bed on his stomach, feet kicking in the air. Yeah? Larry picked up a few seconds later. It sounded like he was trying not to sound too desperate. Do you want to come over? Sal almost felt nervous asking this now. He really hoped Larry wasn't busy tonight. I've been waiting for you to say that for forever. Through the crack, Sal could pick up on how Larry sounded relieved and a bit giddy. Sal moved over on his back, staring at his bedroom ceiling, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars. He was honestly the luckiest person in the world to have the people he did around him. That people were willing to change for him, that people wanted to worry about him, that people were relieved when they heard from him again. The humiliation of his episode hadn't fully worn off yet, but the longer he waited to come out, the longer he waited to tell his friends to take off the kid gloves, the longer it would take for anyone to get back to normal. He couldn't keep them waiting forever. Besides, the more he stayed inside, the more disconnected he would get. He remembered the way he floated through the town as if his head had been removed from his body. It was one of the more unpleasant side effects of whatever was going on inside him, and the more he disconnected like that, the emptier he was going to feel in the long run. He can't do that to himself, or his dad, or his friends. He has to put in the work, too. A sudden knock on his bedroom door occurred shortly before Larry burst into the room, his warm brown eyes quickly scanning the area for blue pigtails, and when he found them, Sal couldn't stop Larry from pulling him into the tightest hug he's ever felt from his best friend. I missed you so much, Sally, he said, his voice quiet and a little strained. All of this was my fault, and I promise it'll never happen again. Sal blinked. What? He asked, pulling away from the hug slightly. This wasn't your fault, Lair. It's the fault of whoever attacked me and my mom. He wrapped his arms around Larry tightly and in reassurance. You didn't do anything wrong. You did your best, and I love you for it, dude. Larry sniffed a bit and pulled away to rub at his nose. That's what my mom said, but it's hard to shake the feeling, what with the whole curse thing. He shoved a hand into his pocket. I know it's not really a curse, but it's just something I've believed for so long that I don't know, it still feels like I fuck everything up all the time. I know, but you don't. I'm serious. Sal rubbed his shoulder. If you say so. Larry looked at Sal with a bit of a melancholy smile. I'm lucky you're my best friend. I don't know where I'd be without you, Larry. Sal's words of encouragement turned Larry's smile much brighter. I love you too, dude. Let's go watch movies and fuck up your dad's pantry. He pointed behind himself with his thumb, gesturing to the living room. That sounds like the best plan I've heard in my entire life, Sal said, pausing. First one to the shelf picks the movie, Sal said as quickly as he could, giving Larry little time to process as Sal weaponized his short stature to squeeze himself behind Larry and throw open his bedroom door to run to the living room. Oh ho ho, no you don't, Larry said, running after him, their feet pounding on the old floor of the apartment. Hey, Sal, what did I tell you earlier? Henry poked his head out of his bedroom, watching as the two boys collided in front of the shelf containing Henry's Betamax collection, and subsequently falling over each other. He rolled his eyes. "Sorry, Henry," Larry said, crushing Sal beneath his body weight. Sal reached up to Larry's chest and twisted one of his nipples until one of the strangest, high-pitched squeals came out of his mouth, and he rolled over onto the floor. "Sorry, Dad," Sal croaked out, shortly after his lungs could actually flip up again. Larry pounced on him and put him in a headlock, wrestling him back to the floor, and Sal countered by attempting to get his fingers stuck in Larry's hair and pull. They ended up in a laughing pile of limbs on the ground, while Henry could only close his eyes and pinch the bridge of his nose. At least this reminded him to take his blood pressure medication. Maybe Larry wasn't going to be treating him as delicately as Sal was afraid he would. Maybe the world he built up in his head over the course of his spiral was a lot more his own projection than he realized. Maybe things could go back to normal more easily than he thought. He really was luckier than he could ever know. He'd been touched by that pale thing, death, more than once, but in spite of the way that touch still lingered on his flesh, how it's marred his psyche, the people he cares about most are always within arm's reach, just a push of a button away, and they pull him back to the present. They let him talk, hold his hand, wrap him in blankets, and carry him to bed. They take care of him, sitting ridiculously close to the TV, hearing and feeling that CRT whine and its warm, static energy in the air, right next to his best friend, stuffing his face with snacks his dad bought. Couldn't make the touch of death on Sal's soul go away. But it gets easier. Every day, it gets a little easier. And that was part 5, chapter 2 of Death Lingering by Canis Rising. This is the last chapter. It was a really long part, because I could not find a breaking point for the life of me, so I was just like, you know what? Whatever, I'll just do the rest. So this is gonna be 5 parts instead of 6, but like, it's basically 6 parts, just with 2 of them being put together. So you know what, why not? I know this chapter was a little dark, but it was still really sweet by the end of it. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed and have a wonderful day. Bye!